Uncle Jim was very good about helping me with all of the Alderman family. He knew a lot about it. So see, that was his grandmother and grandfather.
Right. That's right. It would have been. I had forgotten. I knew it went back several generations, but I didn't realize that it was actually his grandfather and grandmother.
See, because he and Papa Alderman were sons of James Carlton Alderman, and James Carlton Alderman was the son of William Alderman. And that's who it was, because his house, that's where his house was. And the Aldermans owned all of that property. It almost from the county line. I think the Hires was the only one that owned property between the Alderman property and the county line there, up above Uncle Jim's place, because all the way back was that was a part of Uncle Jim's part where the original house was. He tore that down, and then was the that big house, which was James Carlton's house, and that's they lived. And then the next one was Newton Alderman. It's still there. And the one across there was Fanny's house, part of the property. And then Joe's was where after you turn that corner, we go down that road where Fanny's was, and then was Joe Alderman's. And it reached almost 2 hours across Papa and Granny Bird's. See, part of that even was Joe Alderman's. Part of that property across that road was Joe Alderman's, because it reached from across there over to there, and then was Papa and Granny.
That was a lot of acres.
Huh?
That was a lot of acres of land in there.
That's right. But I think most of Joe's was in timber. Most of his, I don't think his was as much of his was cultivated. Papa's it was fair. But now the home place had the largest, and Clois is dead now. She got Uncle Jim's property, and she built a new house up on that other end. On beyond where the original house was. Clois built a house there, and she came back and lived there for a long time on the Jim Alderman's place, and then she got where she couldn't stay by herself, and her son Jack was in Valdosta, and he was a builder too, and so he added a place to his house in Valdosta, and that's where Clois died.
Are there any of the family living in that area still, or have they all moved and died?
I don't think there's a one. I don't think so, because Clois had Jack and the girl. Gail, you know what? Right now I can't call her name either. But she died in childbirth, and then the baby. No, wait a minute. She had her child, then her daughter died in childbirth. Is the way it was. So she just had 2 children. But I was shocked when they called me and told me that Clois died, but I knew that Clois was drinking heavy. She was drinking heavy. And the Griffins, his wife died, and I think Lane told me the other day that this Griffin boy, I think his real name was Hugh. They called him, there's something else. But I think his real name was Hugh Griffin, and they lived in Papa and Granny Alderman's house. Uncle Jim and Papa Alderman built that house before he and Granny Alderman married. Granny Alderman was a Pierce from around Berlin,